I've received a question, however, that helps me with that. I received a question from Samuel Beaton. Shout out to Samuel for the second time in this episode, and thanks again for joining in my Twitch stream while I was watching SummerSlam. But he's asked me about the Forbidden Door, and he's asked me specifically, he says, do you think the Forbidden Door should be more commonplace in professional wrestling, or would that jeopardize the companies involved? The short answer is absolutely yes, I think it should be. The long answer is I think that the Forbidden Door, if that's what we're going to keep calling it from now, while it shouldn't be left wide open, I feel like it should 100% be left ajar. Now, this is just my opinion as always, and at the end of the day, despite never having my own wrestling company or running a show, these are dreams of mine that have quickly become goals that I am genuinely looking at in the hopefully not too distant future that I'd like to, do. So I'm looking at it from a realistic angle, at least. Again, in my opinion, I feel like I am, but it's obviously going to be a bit of give and take. You need to know what both sides are looking to get out of it in the long run. For example, look at the way AEW handled the NWA and Impact Wrestling relationships, respectively. I feel, on paper, AEW should have got both of them more viewers, and because they were smaller, they were getting a bigger benefit out of it, which is just like, okay, it is what it is, right? But in the long run, and I hate using this term because it's overused and quite frequently misused, but in a lot of aspects, and especially Impact Wrestling specifically, I feel like AEW kind of buried them. And again, that's just my opinion, but I feel like at the end of the day, you look at the presentation that Mickie James, as the Knockouts champion, and by proxy Impact Wrestling, as a whole got in one night from the WWE, as opposed to that whole run from AEW. And in some aspects, maybe it's apples and oranges, right? In terms of this, because WWE has far better production. You guys can argue about the quality of the content back and forth until you're blue in the face, WWE versus AEW, whatever. It's all subjective, that's fine, but it's a fact that WWE is at the top of the mountain from a production standpoint. But nevertheless, they did make Mickie James and subsequently Impact look like $1 million in one night. And a great example, I think, to use for me would be to say, look at the way Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling had their relationship a few years back when Ring of Honor were really at arguably their peak in time. Both companies helped elevate everyone involved, no matter whether it was an ROH or a New Japan ring. Every single person on both respective rosters come out of every show 99.999% of the time looking like $1 million, regardless of who was on top, who was on bottom. Didn't matter. And then even look at the one-off with New Japan and WWE, specifically NXT. Tyler Breeze, even in defeat, had his stock go up through the roof after working with a legend like Jushin Thunder Liger. Now, this is kind of a rant, and, it's going to be a great way to close the show, though, I feel. And I'm really glad that you asked this question, Samuel, because when I say I want to run shows myself, I don't just say that lightly. I mean, everyone and their dog that is a professional wrestling fan, they've done their own fantasy booking, of some sort, but every card that I've ever wrote outside of, the Markapalooza kind of stuff here in the pod, and then, obviously, stuff when I'm playing video games or whatever else, but every card that I've ever written down has always been how I would book something realistically if I had the funds. And I'm not thinking millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm thinking to myself, no, I'm picturing this like, okay, it's a small indie company that I am running. Who can I afford? Blah, 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 right? And I look at this like for, in real life, ICW Australia is always going to be my home promotion because they gave me my start. And as a result, I'm always going to be loyal to them. But I'm absolutely loving what Slam Pro Wrestling is doing in the ACT as well. And I think it was episode 18 when I did my first proper Q&A episode alongside Mrs. Crossfire. Joel Southgate asked me my thoughts on the Slam Pro Wrestling League, and as naive as it may sound, I love it. I'm a huge fan. I hope I can go watch a show eventually because to me, the more wrestling, the better because there's something for everyone when there's more content out there to an extent. And the reason I bring that up is because in that same episode, I got asked, and it might have actually been you, Samuel, that asked this. I can't remember off the top of my head, so if it was someone else, my sincerest apologies, but I was asked, as a wrestler, should you work as many places as possible, or should you just stay in your little bubble? And I feel like it's the same principle, right? If a promoter or a trainer, which I've had experiences with this thing where they try and tell you you shouldn't work elsewhere, then they can get themselves absolutely fucked, because that is a load of bullshit. Now, if it's for your well-being or someone genuinely has a bad reputation, then look, maybe they've got genuine advice. But there's so many people out there that say that if you work for this company or if you train here, you won't be booked here and you won't be booked there. And it's just, it shits me to tears. And I understand that no matter how much we squash it, politics and professional wrestling is never going to fully go away. It is what it is. I accept that. But if we can minimize it just as much as we possibly can, I would be so ecstatic for all the guys and girls in this country, all around the world, just in the business of professional wrestling. And my fantasy cards that I have done, which, will hopefully become a reality sooner than later, who knows, but they have people from just about every state. Now, obviously, I'm trying to look at this from a realistic angle, wouldn't be able to have them all at once because funding, I'm never going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I'd love to have people from Perth, Melbourne, Sydney, and a couple of the various promotions up in Queensland, all under the same roof. And I would definitely recommend my guys and girls, if I was running shows, to branch out, hit up other promoters. You do you, because just let them do their thing, man. Like, I don't know. Like I said, it's kind of spurred off a rant, but I feel like that kind of, in my mind, that answered the question. But I think, in conclusion, go check out what I said. Go check out, if you guys haven't that are listening to this, check out the whole, couple of years. Like, there's a lot of content. It'll take you a while to get through, but even if you just watch the special events or the pay-per-views or whatever, where Ring of Honor and New Japan were working together, it's just fantastic stuff. But I definitely think that the Forbidden Door is definitely a good idea, but obviously, like everything, within reason. Kind of like drinking, do it in moderation, but I don't know. I think it is. If you guys agree or disagree, as always, hit me up and tell me how, why, what, who, etc., etc. But I don't see why it's a bad thing if everyone involved has good intentions.